The massive alien ship appeared out of nowhere above Earth, blocking out the sun like a dark metal mountain floating in space. Its black hull was covered in scars and burn marks from countless battles across the galaxy. This was no peaceful visit. This was the Velthari Empire's war machine, and it had come to collect another world. Inside the United Earth Assembly building in Geneva, world leaders sat frozen as Ambassador Nexivol's holographic image flickered to life. The alien stood nearly 8 feet tall, with grey skin stretched tight over an angular frame. His voice carried the cold authority of someone who had delivered this same message hundreds of times before. "People of Earth," he began, his words, translated into every human language simultaneously. "Your planet has been selected for integration into the Velthari Empire. You have 7 rotations of your world to prepare your surrender. Submit peacefully, and your species will be preserved as laborers. Resist, and you will join the void with the 847 civilizations that chose unwisely before you." The hologram displayed a star map showing the Empire's territory. Thousands of systems marked in red, each one representing a conquered world. Not a single one showed any sign of successful resistance. The message was clear. Resistance was futile. President Han Minju of the Earth Council tried to maintain his composure, but his hands shook as he spoke. "Ambassador, surely we can negotiate terms that—" "There are no negotiations," Nexivol cut him off. "Submit or perish, those are your only choices. You have 7 days. The transmission ended, leaving the assembly hall in stunned silence. Panic erupted immediately. Some delegates called for immediate surrender, others for a hopeless fight. Arguments broke out across the chamber as humanity's leaders faced the impossible choice between slavery and extinction. But Admiral Kim Sung sat quietly in the military section, her weathered face showing no emotion. While others shouted and argued, she reached into her jacket and pressed a small device, no bigger than a coin. The device sent out a coded pulse that traveled faster than light to every human settlement in the solar system and beyond. Within minutes, her encrypted message reached mining stations on asteroids, research bases on distant moons, and colony ships traveling between the stars. The message was simple, but carried enormous weight. Protocol Helios is now active. The stars remember those who burn brightest. Deep in classified military bunkers, scientists and engineers who had worked in secret for decades suddenly became the most important people in human history. They had spent 30 years preparing for this exact moment, not preparing to fight the Empire, but preparing for something far more radical. Dr. Park Min received the signal at Lunar Base and immediately began powering up equipment that officially didn't exist. On Mars, Commander Lee Hanna started evacuating civilians, while her teams prepared their own version of the project. Across the solar system, humanity's hidden weapons began to wake up. The Velthari had given humanity 7 days to surrender. They had no idea they had just triggered the most desperate and brilliant plan in human history. 3 days after the ultimatum, President Han Minju stood before the cameras with tears in his eyes. His voice cracked as he read humanity's surrender message to the galaxy. The United Earth government formally accepts the terms of the Velthari Empire. We request the traditional 30-day grace period to organize our transition and prepare tribute as required by galactic law. The alien response came within hours. Ambassador Nexivol's image appeared again, this time with what might have been satisfaction on his grey features. "Your wisdom serves your species well. You have 30 rotations to prepare. Our advance forces will arrive to oversee the transition." Across Earth, people wept in the streets. News broadcasts showed families holding each other, children asking their parents what slavery would be like. The surrender seemed complete and heartbreaking. Even the Velthari military analysts, monitoring human communications, noted the genuine despair in every transmission they intercepted. But 400,000 kilometers away on Lunar Base, Dr. Park Min wiped sweat from his forehead as he watched readings that should have been impossible. The fusion reactor hummed quietly in the underground laboratory, its core burning at temperatures that exceeded the surface of most stars. According to everything humanity knew about physics, the reactor should have exploded or collapsed into a black hole. Instead, It purred like a content cat. "The magnetic containment is holding perfectly," reported his assistant, Dr. Yoon-Jina, her voice filled with amazement. "The plasma is stable at 40 million degrees, and we're getting energy output levels that our old computers can't even calculate." Park Min nodded grimly. 30 years of secret research, and we finally cracked it just in time. How long until the other bases report in? The answer came through encrypted quantum channels. Mars base confirmed their reactor was online. Europa Station reported success. Even the tiny research post on Ceres had managed to build their version. Across the solar system, humanity's hidden weapons were awakening. To any outside observer, the preparations looked exactly like a defeated civilization getting ready for occupation. Transport ships moved between planets, apparently relocating government officials and preparing tribute. Mining operations increased their output, seemingly to gather resources for their new masters. Everything appeared normal. The Velthari scouts, who arrived early to monitor the surrender, saw exactly what they expected. Their reports back to the main fleet were routine, subject species showing appropriate submission behaviors, no signs of resistance preparation, standard occupation procedures recommended. What they missed were the subtle details. The transport ships carried civilians away from major population centers, not toward them. The increased mining wasn't gathering tribute, it was extracting materials for more reactors. Most importantly, they couldn't detect the new energy signatures because their sensors had never encountered anything like what humanity had built. On Earth, Admiral Kim Sung met secretly with other military leaders in a bunker deep beneath the Swiss Alps. The walls were lined with screens showing reactor status from across the solar system. Every single one glowed green. Phase 1 is complete, she announced quietly. Every major human settlement now has a Prometheus reactor online. Phase 2 begins in 24 hours. Above them, Velthari ships began arriving in Earth orbit, confident they were inheriting another defeated world. They had no idea they were flying into humanity's trap. The Velthari landing craft descended through Earth's atmosphere like metal raindrops, their engines humming with the confidence of 1,000 previous conquests. In New York, London, Tokyo, and 50 other major cities, the alien ships touched down in central squares and government districts. Tall, grey-skinned soldiers emerged, carrying weapons that could level city blocks. Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching his forces deploy across the blue planet below. Everything was proceeding exactly as it had on 847 other worlds. The humans were cooperating. Their leaders had already been contacted about tribute schedules, and resistance appeared non-existent. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving standard compliance reports from all landing zones. The humans are gathering in designated areas as instructed." But 60 million kilometers away, on the closest planet to Earth's sun, Commander Choi Wan stood in the control room of Mercury Station. The small research base had been humanity's most extreme outpost, where scientists studied solar radiation and tested materials that could survive temperatures hot enough to melt steel. Now it would serve a very different purpose. All personnel evacuated to minimum safe distance, reported his second-in-command, Lieutenant Park Soo-jin. "Reactor core is at maximum containment." Choi Wan placed his hand on a simple red button. For 30 years, humanity had wondered if this moment would ever come. Now that it was here, he felt surprisingly calm. "For everyone who came before us and everyone who comes after," he said quietly. He pressed the button. The Prometheus reactor on Mercury didn't just activate, it unleashed 30 years of pent-up human determination in the form of pure stellar fire. The fusion cascade began in the reactor core and spread outward, converting the planet's metal-rich surface into fuel for an artificial sun. Within minutes, Mercury blazed with the light of a newborn star. The flash was so bright it overwhelmed sensors across the solar system. On Earth, the Velthari soldiers looked up in confusion as their equipment screamed warnings about impossible energy readings from the direction of the sun. But Mercury was just the beginning. On Titan, Saturn's largest moon, the signal arrived exactly 60 seconds later. Commander Lee Hana had been watching the countdown on her screen, waiting for Mercury's light to reach them. "Our turn," she announced to her team. "Initiate cascade." Titan's surface, rich with organic compounds, fed the fusion fire differently than Mercury's metals. The moon transformed into a brilliant orange star, its light visible from Earth even during the day. Europa followed 18 minutes later, its icy surface flashing into plasma as Commander Namtai activated their reactor. The ice moon became a blue-white beacon burning in Jupiter's shadow. Mars was the most spectacular of all. The red planet's iron-rich surface provided perfect fuel for the fusion cascade. As Commander O-Rin triggered the final sequence, Mar. Within 2 hours, humanity had kindled 4 new stars in their solar system. Admiral Kethvar stared at his sensor displays in complete disbelief. The readings made no sense. Planets didn't just become stars. It was impossible. "Sir," his trembling communications officer reported, "we're detecting similar energy signatures from the outer system. The humans, they've turned their entire solar system into a stellar beacon." For the first time in his military career, Kethvar felt fear. The Velthari Empire's response was swift and brutal. Within days of humanity's stellar display, massive, war fleets began jumping into the solar system from across the galaxy. These weren't occupation forces, these were planet killers, ships designed to turn entire worlds into cosmic dust. But when the alien armada arrived, they found something impossible. Earth's solar system was empty of human life. The planets still burned like artificial stars, but there were no people, no cities, no signs of civilization. Humanity had simply vanished. Admiral Kethvar ordered his ships to scan every asteroid, every moon, every piece of space debris. His sensors found nothing but empty space and the haunting glow of the 4 new stars humanity had created. It was as if 10 billion people had simply evaporated into the void. "Where are they?" he demanded, pacing his bridge like a caged animal. "An entire species doesn't just disappear." The answer came from the darkness between stars, in the cold region beyond Pluto, where ancient comets drifted in eternal night. Captain Lee Hana floated in the command center of what used to be a simple mining ship. The vessel had been transformed into something the galaxy had never seen, a starship powered by a miniature sun. The reactor hummed in the ship's heart, no larger than a car but burning with the intensity of a stellar core. Around her, 50 other converted mining vessels drifted silently through the Oort cloud, each one carrying a fragment of humanity's fury. "Target acquired," her navigator, Lieutenant Kim Tae-hyun, reported quietly. "Velthari Supply Depot, 17. Light minutes ahead. Minimal escort. They think they're safe this far from the fighting." Lee Hana smiled grimly. The aliens had controlled space for thousands of years by following predictable patterns. They established supply lines, built fortified positions, and moved their fleets in formations that had worked for millennia. But humanity had thrown away the rulebook. All ships, prepare for hit and run. Remember, we're not here to fight fair. We're here to make them afraid of the dark. The human ships accelerated to impossible speeds, their stellar cores providing power that conventional engines couldn't match. They struck the supply depot like ghosts, destroying fuel stores and ammunition, before vanishing back into the void. By the time Velthari reinforcements arrived, they found only wreckage and the fading glow of human plasma trails. But the most shocking news came from the edge of known space, on a distant world called Kepler 442b. Commander Choi Wan had led a small colony there years before, establishing humanity's furthest outpost among the stars. When a Velthari battle group arrived to crush this remote settlement, they expected an easy victory. Instead, they found Commander Choi Wan standing alone on the planet's surface as their ships descended. He looked up at the alien fleet with calm eyes and placed his hand on a device no bigger than a smartphone. "We are not the same species that you tried to conquer," he transmitted to the approaching ships. "We have become something new." Kepler 442b erupted into stellar fire, its surface transforming into a plasma ocean that blazed brighter than its own sun. The Velthari battle group was blinded instantly, their sensors overloaded by the impossible display. But most disturbing of all were the final transmissions from the planet's surface. Commander Choi Wan and his people hadn't died in the stellar transformation. Somehow, impossibly, they had adapted to live within the burning plasma itself, their voices echoing through space as beings of pure energy. The Empire realized they weren't fighting humans anymore. They were fighting something entirely new. On the burning surface of Europa, Dr. Yoon Jina watched something that should have been impossible. Through the observation window of her research station, she could see children playing outside, not in protective suits, but directly in the plasma flames that had replaced Europa's icy surface. 8-year-old Park Ji-hoon laughed as he chased. His friends threw streams of liquid fire, his small body glowing with the same orange light as the artificial star beneath his feet. When he stumbled and fell into a pool of molten plasma, he simply stood up and brushed himself off like he had fallen into ordinary water. Day 47 of observation. Dr. Yoon spoke into her recorder, her voice filled with wonder and concern. The children born after the stellar transformation continue to show abilities that contradict everything we know about human biology. They appear to be immune to radiation levels that would kill a normal person in seconds. Through her headset, she heard similar reports from research stations across the solar system. On Mars, teenagers were swimming through lava flows, their bodies absorbing stellar energy like plants absorbing sunlight. On Titan, a group of young adults had learned to reshape the plasma around them, molding flames like clay to build structures that existed at temperatures hot enough to melt diamonds. But perhaps most amazing was 12-year-old Lee Suna, who had been born just days after Mercury's transformation. She had never known a world without stellar fire, and her abilities had grown beyond anything the scientists could measure. "Watch this, Dr. Yoon," Suna called out, standing at the edge of Europa's observation deck. Without any equipment or protection, she simply stepped off the platform and began walking through space itself. The vacuum that would kill any normal human seemed to support her like solid ground. Dr. Yoon watched in amazement as the girl moved between Europa and distant Mars, covering millions of kilometers in minutes. Suna wasn't using any kind of ship or technology. She was somehow traveling through space by manipulating the stellar radiation that connected all of humanity's artificial stars. Even more incredible was how these new humans communicated. Dr. Yoon had noticed that children on different planets seemed to know things that had happened light years away, information that should have taken years to travel between stars. They were somehow sharing thoughts and experiences instantly, across impossible distances. The Velthari Empire's xenobiologists were baffled by the reports coming from their scouts. Admiral Kethavar read the latest intelligence briefing with growing unease. "Sir," his science officer reported, "our long-range observers are sending reports that make no sense. They claim to have seen humans walking on the surface of actual stars, not just the artificial ones they created, but natural stellar bodies with temperatures exceeding 6,000 degrees. Another report came in from the outer rim. A Velthari patrol ship near the Vega system reports contact with human children who appeared to be playing games inside the star's corona. When the ship approached for closer observation, the children simply waved and disappeared into the stellar plasma. But the most disturbing report came from Commander Nextal's Deep Space Reconnaissance Unit. We encountered what appeared to be a human adult who claimed to be tending a garden of newborn stars. When we demanded surrender, she simply gestured, and 3 new stars ignited in the surrounding space. She called herself a star shepherd and said humanity was learning to plant light wherever darkness had grown too comfortable. Dr. Yoon continued her research, documenting humanity's transformation with a mixture of scientific excitement and parental worry. These children were still recognizably human in their hearts and minds, still laughing and playing and learning about the world around them. But they were also becoming something unprecedented in galactic history, a species that could live and thrive in the hearts of stars themselves. The Empire had conquered 847 worlds by understanding the limitations of biological life. But humanity was rewriting those limitations with every passing day. Admiral Kavrex had commanded Velthari fleets for over 3 centuries. He had seen plasma cannons melt entire cities, watched antimatter bombs turn moons into cosmic dust, and witnessed the complete destruction of civilizations that dared to resist the Empire. Nothing in the galaxy had ever survived the full might of their war machine, until now. "Fire all batteries," he roared from the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. "Target the human formation directly ahead." The massive dreadnought unleashed its full arsenal, energy beams that could crack planets, missiles that burned hotter than most stars, and plasma cannons that had never failed to destroy their targets. The weapons streaked through space toward a group of humans floating in the void without any ships or protection. The humans simply raised their hands. Cavrex watched in horror as his planet-killing weapons struck the floating figures and simply stopped. The energy beams were absorbed into their bodies like water soaking into sand. The missiles' explosions seemed to feed them, making their bodies glow brighter. The plasma cannon fire was caught in their bare hands and reshaped into beautiful, dancing ribbons of light. "Impossible," whispered his weapons officer, staring at readings that made no sense. "Sir, our most powerful weapons are having no effect. In fact, they seem to be making the humans stronger." One of the floating humans, a young woman who glowed with the warm light of a star, began to move toward their ship. She wasn't using any kind of propulsion. She was simply walking through the vacuum of space, as if it were solid ground covering thousands of kilometers with each step. "Raise shields," Cavrex commanded desperately. "All power to defensive systems." The Velthari shields, strong enough to deflect the explosion of a dying star, flickered and died the moment the human woman touched them. She passed through the ship's hull like it was made of mist, her form condensing from pure light into something almost solid as she materialized. On the bridge, panic erupted among the crew. Soldiers raised their weapons, but the energy beams passed harmlessly through her body. She looked at them with eyes that held the warmth of a campfire and the intensity of a supernova. "I am General Namte," she said, her voice carrying the sound of solar winds and the crackling of stellar fire. "Though I suppose I'm not quite the same person who held that rank when your empire first arrived." Cavrex could see through her translucent form to the stars beyond. She was more energy than matter now, held together by willpower and burning determination rather than flesh and bone. What are you?" he stammered, backing away from his command chair. "We are what you made us," Namte replied calmly. "You came to our worlds demanding submission. You offered us slavery or death, but we found a third choice, transformation." She gestured toward the view screen, where more humans floated among the stars. Some looked almost normal, while others were barely recognizable as the species that had once lived on a single blue planet. All of them burned with inner fire. "Your empire has conquered 847 worlds by exploiting the limitations of biological life," Namte continued. "Fear of death, need for oxygen, vulnerability to radiation. We decided to submit those limitations to the fire and become something new." Around the bridge, control panels began to spark and smoke as her mere presence overloaded the ship's systems. The Velthari crew pressed themselves against the walls, terrified of touching the being of living starlight that had invaded their flagship. "Here is humanity's counter-ultimatum," Namte announced, her form growing brighter. "Leave our space now and never return. Continue this war, and we will teach your empire what it means to burn. The choice is yours, but choose quickly. We are still learning to control what we've become, and accidents tend to create new stars." For the first time in millennia, a Velthari admiral felt true fear. Commander Orin floated in the heart of what used to be the Kepler 442 system, but the old star charts were useless now. Where once there had been a single yellow sun and a handful of rocky planets, now dozens of artificial stars burned in carefully arranged patterns, each one pulsing with the rhythm of human hearts. She had changed the most of all humanity's survivors. Her body was barely visible anymore, just a shimmering outline of concentrated starlight that could reshape itself at will. When she spoke, her voice came from the stellar winds themselves, carrying across light years to reach every human consciousness in the growing constellation. "Today we learn to create from nothing," she announced to the thousands of students floating around her. Some still looked mostly human, glowing softly with inner fire. Others had transformed into beings of pure energy, their thoughts visible as dancing flames in the cosmic darkness. Young Park Min-ho, barely 16 but already capable of surviving in a star's core, raised his hand. "Commander, how do we make a star from empty space? There's nothing here but vacuum and cosmic dust." Oh-rin smiled, the expression visible as a warm pulse of golden light. "That's where you're wrong, Min-ho. Space is never truly empty. There's dark matter, quantum fluctuations, the background radiation left over from the birth of the universe itself. We've learned to gather these fragments and convince them to remember what it felt like to be part of a star." She demonstrated by extending her consciousness into the seemingly empty space around them. Slowly, invisibly, she began collecting particles of dark matter that couldn't normally interact with regular matter. Her transformed human abilities allowed her to touch things that had been beyond the reach of any known technology. The process was like building a campfire, but on a cosmic scale. First, she gathered the dark matter into a dense ball, compressing it with focused will until it began to heat up. Then she added cosmic dust, hydrogen atoms scattered thin across space, and the quantum energy that constantly flickered in and out of existence. "Feel the rhythm," she instructed her students. "Every star has a heartbeat, every flame has a song. Listen for it, and then teach the matter around you to dance to that music." The students reached out with senses that no baseline human had ever possessed. Slowly, tentatively, they began to gather their own dark matter, following Oh-rin's example. Some succeeded in creating small flames that burned for a few seconds before flickering out. Others managed to birth tiny stars no bigger than marbles, perfect miniatures that could have powered entire cities. But their lesson was interrupted by alarms echoing through the stellar network. The Velthari Empire's greatest war fleet was approaching. Over 1,000 ships, including the legendary planet-killer Void Render, that had destroyed entire solar systems. Admiral Zexmore commanded the fleet from his flagship, confident that this would be the Empire's final victory over the rebellious humans. His intelligence report spoke of scattered refugees hiding in the Kepler system, weakened and disorganized after months of running. Instead, his sensors detected something impossible. Where the star charts showed a single system, now there were 47 burning stars arranged in a perfect spiral pattern. Each star pulsed with synchronized energy, and between them moved forms of light that his computers couldn't classify. "Sir," his tactical officer reported with a trembling voice, "we're not detecting any planets or space stations. The humans appear to be living inside the stars themselves." "Impossible," Zexmore snapped. "No biological life can survive stellar temperatures." "Sir, with respect, I don't think they're biological anymore. The battle began unlike any other in galactic history. The Velthari fleet opened fire with weapons designed to extinguish stars, but the humans didn't defend. They created. Every energy beam fired at them was absorbed and transformed into raw material for new stellar births. Commander Oh-rin rose to meet the fleet personally, her form expanding until she appeared to be made of the same fire as the stars around her. With gestures that looked almost like conducting an orchestra, she began to kindle new suns directly in the path of the enemy ships. The Velthari found themselves fighting not an army, but the fundamental forces of creation itself. The transformation began at midnight, Velthari Standard Time, when Emperor Vashitar was reviewing battle reports in his palace on the capital world of Nexus Prime. He had ruled the Empire for 8 centuries, commanding fleets that had conquered nearly 1,000 worlds. No species had ever posed a real threat to his dominion. Then the stars began to change. It started as a single new light in the constellation of the Hunter, barely visible to the naked eye. Within an hour, 3 more stars ignited nearby. By dawn, an entire section of the night sky blazed with artificial suns that pulsed in perfect rhythm, like a cosmic heartbeat visible across the galaxy. "Your Majesty," his chief astronomer burst into the throne room without ceremony, "we're detecting massive stellar ignition events across 17 sectors. New stars are appearing faster than our computers can catalog them." Vashitar stood at the massive viewing window of his palace, watching the impossible display above. The new stars weren't random. They formed patterns, messages written in fire across the darkness of space. As he watched, the lights spelled out words in perfect Velthari script. "We do not kneel. Across the Empire's territory, similar displays were appearing. On industrial worlds, factory workers stopped their assembly lines to stare at skies that now burned with defiant human messages. On military outposts, commanders received panicked reports from their own people asking if the stars themselves had declared war on the Empire. But the most disturbing aspect wasn't the messages, it was how the stars communicated with each other. Dr. Yunjina, now existing as a form of living plasma orbiting what used to be Europa, had discovered that humanity's artificial stars were connected by streams of quantum-entangled particles. Information could travel instantly between stars, thousands of light-years apart. "We've created the galaxy's first stellar internet," she explained to Admiral Kim Sung, whose consciousness now spanned 3 different star systems simultaneously. Every human settlement, every artificial sun, every transformed individual is connected to the network. We can coordinate actions across the entire galaxy in real time. The scope of humanity's transformation became clear when Emperor Vashitar dispatched his most powerful weapon, the Star-Killer fleet equipped with Nova bombs capable of extinguishing entire suns. He led the armada personally, determined to end the human rebellion by destroying their artificial stars one by one. The fleet's first target was a cluster of 7 human-made stars in the former location of Alpha Centauri. The Nova bombs struck perfectly, each one designed to collapse a star's fusion core and turn it into a cold, dead sphere of matter. For exactly 37 seconds, the bombs worked. 7 stars went dark simultaneously. Then Commander Park Soo-jin, who had been learning stellar resurrection techniques in the Vega system, simply reached across 50 light-years and rekindled all 7 stars with a single thought. The dead suns burst back to life, burning brighter than before. "Impossible!" Vashitar roared as his weapons officers stared at their instruments in disbelief. "Stars cannot be resurrected." But even as he spoke, more human stars were igniting across the galaxy. For every star the Empire tried to destroy, 10 more blazed to life. Humanity wasn't just creating individual suns anymore, they were weaving entire networks of stellar fire that stretched across galactic arms. Young Lee Suna, now grown into a being capable of existing simultaneously in multiple star systems, sent a message directly to the Emperor's flagship. Her voice came from the artificial stars themselves, carried on waves of stellar radiation. "You taught us that resistance was futile," she said, her words echoing from every human-made star in the galaxy. "But you were wrong. Resistance isn't futile. Resistance is fuel. Every world you conquered, every people you enslaved, every star you extinguished, they all taught us that someone needs to light new fires in the darkness." The Emperor watched in growing horror as humanity's stellar network continued to expand, connecting distant parts of the galaxy with threads of living light. His 1,000-year empire was being challenged not by ships or armies, but by the power of creation itself. Emperor Vashitar stood in his war room, surrounded by holographic displays that showed the impossible truth. Red dots marked his empire's territory, thousands of worlds that had submitted to Velthari rule over the centuries. But now, scattered throughout that territory like seeds of light, blue dots represented humanity's growing stellar network. In just 6 months, humans had created over 300 artificial stars, each one hosting millions of transformed people who treated the vacuum of space like their backyard. "Your Majesty," his military advisor spoke carefully, "our analysts have run every possible scenario. We cannot win this war." The Emperor's grey skin had grown pale as he absorbed the reports. His fleets had thrown everything at the humans: planet killers, star destroyers, weapons that could crack moons in half. Nothing worked. Every attack only seemed to fuel humanity's growth, teaching them new ways to manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe. "They don't fight like any species we've encountered," the advisor continued. "When we destroy their positions, they simply create new ones from empty space. When we target their leaders, we discover their consciousness exists across multiple star systems simultaneously. They've become something beyond our understanding." The final straw came when young Park Ji-hoon, now 16 and capable of birthing entire solar systems, had appeared in the throne room of the Imperial Palace itself. He materialized from focused starlight, his teenage form glowing with the warmth of a campfire but containing the power of a supernova. "Hello, Emperor," he had said politely as if he was simply visiting a neighbor. "I wanted to talk to you about something important." The Emperor's guards had fired their most powerful weapons at the boy. The energy blasts passed harmlessly through his body and were absorbed into the palace walls, which began to glow softly with stored stellar energy. "We don't want to hurt anyone," Jehun had continued conversationally. "We just want to be left alone to grow and learn and become whatever we're meant to become. But if you keep attacking us, we'll have to defend ourselves. And honestly, we're still figuring out how to control what we can do. Last week, my little sister sneezed and accidentally created a binary star system." The message was clear. Humanity hadn't just become powerful, they had become unpredictable. The Empire built its success on understanding the limitations of biological life, but humans had transcended those limitations entirely. "Issue the withdrawal order," Emperor Vashatar finally commanded, his voice heavy with the weight of the first defeat in Imperial history. "All fleets are to retreat from human-occupied space immediately." The withdrawal took weeks to complete. As Velthari ships pulled back from hundreds of systems, they left behind warning beacons for other spacefaring species. The message was simple. Beware the star kindlers. They chose transformation over submission. Admiral Kim Sung watched the retreat from her position at the heart of the Proxima Centauri star system, her consciousness now distributed across 17 different artificial suns. She had been one of the first to undergo the transformation, and she still remembered the fear and uncertainty of those early days when humanity faced extinction. Now she existed as something that would have been unimaginable to her former self. A being of living stellar fire who could create new worlds with a thought and travel between star systems by riding waves of cosmic radiation. "How we've come so far," she mused. Her voice carried across the human stellar network to reach every transformed consciousness in the galaxy. 6 months ago, we were a single species clinging to one blue planet. Today, we are the shepherds of stellar fire, planting new lights in the cosmic darkness. Children who had been born after the transformation played games that involved juggling miniature stars, while their parents worked on projects that would have been considered miracles by the old Earth, growing gardens in the hearts of supernovas, painting aurora across the skies of dead worlds, teaching asteroids to sing in harmony with solar winds. "We were asked to submit," Admiral Kim Sung broadcast to the galaxy, her message carried by the light of hundreds of human-made stars. "Instead, we submitted ourselves to becoming something greater. The stars are no longer distant lights in our sky, they are home. The galaxy would never be the same." Humanity had proven that when faced with impossible choices, sometimes the answer was to transcend the question entirely.